A lonely CEO thought he had everything but when he found a little girl collapsing at a bus stop. He discovered a world he never knew he was missing, and a heart he didn't know he still had. The city was alive with lights that night, but for one man, the glow of the skyscrapers meant nothing. Daniel Ross sat in the back of his sleek black car, staring blankly out the tinted window as his driver made his way through the busy streets. He was the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the city, a man known for his sharp suits, sharp words, and even sharper business decisions. To the world, Daniel was powerful. To himself, he was just empty. He had worked his way up from nothing. Every day of his adult life had been about climbing higher, earning more, building an empire that no one could question, and he had succeeded. His name was on magazines, his face appeared on business channels, and people spoke about him in hushed tones at corporate events. But when he came home at night, there was no one waiting. His penthouse apartment was silent, too large for one. Man filled with expensive furniture but no warmth. Even the staff he employed moved quietly around him, like shadows who knew not to get too close. It wasn't always like this. Once he had a wife, they had met when he was still struggling, when his dreams were still just dreams. She had believed in him, supported him, smiled at him when things were hard. But success came with a price. He started spending more nights at the office than at home. Promises of dinners, vacations, or even quiet weekends were broken one after another. Eventually, the smile faded from her face. Arguments replaced laughter, and one day she packed her bags and left. There were no children between them, only silence after she was gone. That was years ago, but the loneliness had never left. Daniel poured himself into work. If he wasn't signing contracts, he was in meetings. If he wasn't in meetings, he was on flights to other countries. He told himself he didn't need anyone. He told himself success was enough. But deep down, he knew it was a lie. The money, the cars, the power, it filled his days, but not his heart. That evening was just another long day. A meeting had dragged into dinner time, and by the time he left the office, the city streets were slick with rain. His driver asked if he wanted to stop for food, but Daniel shook his head. Never felt hungry these days. Food was just another routine, something to get through, like everything else. As the car moved past small shops and bus stops, Daniel leaned back, tired. He was about to close his eyes when something unusual caught his attention. At the side of the road, under the yellow streetlight, he saw a small figure sitting alone at a bus stop. It was late, too late for a child to be there. The figure looked fragile, almost lost in the rain. "Stop the car," Daniel said suddenly. His driver, surprised, pulled over. Daniel rolled down the window and looked again. It was a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 8. Her clothes were worn, her shoes scuffed, and her hair clung to her face because of the rain. She sat on the bench, shivering, her thin arms wrapped around herself. For a moment, Daniel just watched. Maybe her parents were nearby. Maybe she had simply gotten separated. But then, before he could decide what to do, the girl swayed forward, and in a second that seemed to stretch into forever, she collapsed onto the wet pavement. Daniel's heart, which hadn't raced for anything outside of business in years, suddenly jumped. He opened the car door without thinking, his polished shoes splashing into the water on the road. He hurried to the bus stop, his expensive coat quickly getting wet. The girl was lying motionless, her face pale, her lips slightly parted. Daniel bent down, his hands awkward as he tried to shake her gently. "Hey, are you okay? Can you hear me?" His voice, usually cold and commanding in boardrooms, cracked with worry. Her eyelids fluttered, but she didn't respond. Daniel's chest tightened in a way he didn't understand. Fear. Real fear. He looked back at his driver. Call an ambulance now. Within minutes, though it felt like an eternity, they were lifting her into the car. Daniel didn't want to wait on the wet street for help. "We'll take her straight to the hospital," he ordered, his voice sharp with urgency. He cradled the girl in his arms as the driver sped off, and he could feel how light she was, far too light for a child. Her age, her small head rested against his chest, and he could hear her breathing shallow, weak. It shook him. He didn't know this child, but something about holding her. Something about the way her tiny fingers twitched, as if grasping for safety, made his heart ache. He whispered almost to himself, "It's okay. You're safe now. Just hold on." The hospital, doctors and nurses rushed her away. Daniel followed closely, ignoring the stares. Men like him didn't usually show up at emergency rooms in drenched coats, carrying unconscious children. Questions came quickly. "Is she your daughter? Do you know her name?" Daniel shook his head, feeling strangely helpless. "I found her at a bus stop. She collapsed. Just help her." The staff worked quickly, attaching monitors, checking her vitals, giving her fluids. Daniel stood by the glass window, watching, his fists clenched. He had faced boardroom battles worth millions, but never had he felt so powerless. Finally, a doctor came out. "She's stable for now. Severe dehydration and low blood sugar. She hasn't been eating properly. We'll keep her overnight for observation." Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Relief washed over him, but it was mixed with something else, and not at her, but at the situation. How could a child this young be left alone like that? Where were her parents? Why was no one looking after her? When he was allowed to see her, she was resting in the hospital bed, hooked to an IV. Her small face looked even smaller against the white pillow. Daniel sat down in the chair beside her, his wet coat finally removed, his usually perfect hair slightly messy from the rain. For a long time, he just sat there in silence, watching her breathe. He didn't even know her name. But something about her stirred something deep inside him, something he thought was long dead. The nurse walked in quietly. "Sir, the bills for her treatment? I'll cover everything," Daniel said immediately, cutting her off. Money didn't matter to him at that moment. He just wanted to make sure the girl was safe. The nurse raised her eyebrows but nodded. It wasn't every day a man like this, clearly wealthy, clearly important, showed such concern for a child who wasn't his own. When the nurse left, Daniel leaned back in the chair, staring at the girl again. He wondered who she was, what her story was, why she had been all alone at a bus stop on a rainy night. Something told him this was not a simple accident. Something told him there was pain behind those closed eyes, pain no child should carry. And, for reasons he couldn't explain, Daniel felt that this moment finding her, saving her, was going to change everything. Dings just like a natural flow of storytelling. The hospital room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of machines. Daniel sat by the little girl's bed, staring at her small hands resting on the blanket. He still didn't know her name. He knew was that she had collapsed in the rain, hungry and weak. And now she was lying there like a fragile bird. A nurse came in to check her drip and smiled faintly. "She's resting well. She'll wake up soon." Daniel nodded. He wanted to ask questions, but his throat felt dry. He was not used to this kind of situation. In business meetings, he always had the right words, but here, with a little girl lying in front of him, he didn't even know what to say. Hours passed slowly. Daniel stayed. He didn't care about his phone buzzing with emails or the important papers waiting at his office. Something inside him refused to leave. He felt responsible, but it was more than responsibility. There was a strange pull he couldn't explain. Finally, the girl stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, and she looked around the room with wide, frightened eyes. Daniel leaned forward quickly, but he softened his voice. "Hey, you're safe. You're in the hospital. Don't be scared." Her lips moved, but her voice was weak. "Water, please." Daniel stood up so fast, the chair scraped loudly against the floor. He poured water carefully into a small cup and held it to her lips. She sipped slowly, her tiny hands shaking as she tried to hold the cup. Daniel gently steadied it for her. When she was done, she lay back against the pillow. Her face was pale, but at least her eyes were open now. Daniel hesitated, then asked softly, "What's your name?" For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she whispered, "Lily." Daniel repeated it under his breath. "Lily." It felt strange, but also natural, like he had to remember it. He asked again, carefully. Where are your parents, Lily? Should I call them? Do they know you're here? The little girl turned her head away, staring at the wall, her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. She didn't answer. Daniel felt a pang in his chest. He had expected relief, some explanation, but instead, he felt the heavy weight of silence. He wanted to ask again, but he stopped himself. She looked too fragile, too scared. Soon, a doctor entered with a social worker. The woman introduced herself politely. Mr. Ross, thank you for bringing the child here. We'll need to ask a few questions. Do you know anything about her? Daniel shook his head. Nothing. I just saw her at the bus stop. She collapsed. That's all. The social worker turned to Lily with a gentle smile. Sweetheart, can you tell us where your mommy or daddy is? Do you have someone we can call? Lily bit her lip and stayed silent. Her small hands twisted the blanket nervously. After a long pause, she whispered, no. The woman tried again, asking about relatives, an address, even a school. But Lily kept shaking her head or whispering, I don't know. It was like she was building a wall around herself. Daniel watched all of this, and something inside him tightened. He could see that Lily didn't trust anyone, maybe because life had already hurt her too much. He knew that feeling, though he would never admit it aloud. The social worker sighed. All right, we'll keep trying. For now, she'll stay here under care. Thank you again, Mr. Ross. You've done more than most people would. Daniel only nodded, but inside his mind was racing. He couldn't stop thinking about how empty her answers were, how lost she looked. He had spent his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him, money, deals, influence. And yet this child wanted nothing. She had no one. That night, Daniel didn't go home. He stayed in the hospital chair until morning. The staff offered to find him a better room, but he refused. He wanted to be there if Lily woke up again. He told himself he was only making sure she was okay, but deep down he knew it was more than that. The next day, he tried talking to her again. He brought a small box of apple juice from the hospital cafeteria and held it out. Do you like juice? Lily looked at the box, then at him. Slowly, she nodded. She took it with both hands, sipping quietly. After a few moments, Daniel asked gently, Why were you at the bus stop all alone? She hesitated, her little eyes darting away. Finally, she whispered, I was waiting, but nobody came. Waiting for who? Daniel pressed softly. My dad, she said, so quietly he almost didn't hear. Daniel felt his chest grow heavy. And where is he now? Lily's eyes filled with tears again. She didn't answer. She just stared at her juice as if it could hide her pain. Daniel didn't push further. He sat back, feeling something unfamiliar. Anger, sadness, and helplessness, all mixed together. He wanted to storm out and find whoever had left her. But he didn't even know where to start. Later that afternoon, when the social worker returned, Daniel was still there. She looked surprised. You're still here, Mr. Ross? You don't need to stay. We'll handle everything. Daniel shook his head. I want to stay, at least until she's stronger. The woman studied him for a moment. She had heard of him, of course. Everyone in the city knew the famous CEO, but she had never expected to find him sitting beside a lonely child in a hospital. His expression tired yet protective. Very well, she said softly. But you understand, if she has no family, the state will have to step in. Daniel nodded, but the words felt heavy. He didn't know why, but the thought of Lily being taken away, placed in some unknown home with strangers, made his stomach twist. He didn't even know her well, but he already felt something stirring inside him, a need to make sure she was safe. That evening, Lily spoke again. Her voice was small, but Daniel leaned closer to catch every word. Thank you for not leaving me. Daniel froze. Those words hit him harder than any deal or contract ever could. He swallowed hard, and for a moment, he didn't trust his own voice. Finally, he said quietly, You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad you're okay. Inside, he was shaken, because no one had ever said something like that to him before. No one had ever looked at him with that kind of fragile trust. The days that followed blurred together. Daniel found himself arranging his schedule so he could spend time at the hospital. His assistant was shocked when he canceled meetings, something he never did, but Daniel didn't care. Every time he walked into that hospital room and saw Lily's small smile, something inside him softened. He learned small things about her. She liked drawing, even if it was just with a broken crayon on hospital paper. She liked apple juice more than orange juice. She sometimes hummed little songs under her breath when she thought no one was listening. But whenever the conversation turned to family, she closed up again, her eyes going far away. Daniel didn't push. Instead, he stayed. He told himself he was only doing it because he had been the one to find her. But the truth was clear. He couldn't stop thinking about her, even when he left. At night, in his huge, empty penthouse, he imagined her small voice saying, "Thank you for not leaving me." It echoed in his mind, breaking down walls he had built for years. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. He had stepped into a story far bigger than he expected, and it was going to change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The hospital days turned into a quiet routine. Every morning Daniel would stop by before going to the office, and every evening he would return after work, sometimes staying late into the night. The staff had grown used to seeing him there, and some of them whispered in surprise, a man like him, wealthy, powerful, always too busy, was now sitting by the bedside of a little girl. Like it was the most important thing in the world. Lily was getting stronger. Her cheeks had a bit more color, and she smiled sometimes, though it was a shy smile. Daniel found himself waiting for those moments, as if they were gifts he didn't deserve but couldn't stop wanting. One morning, he brought her a small sketchbook and a box of colored pencils. "I thought you might like these," he said, setting them on her bed. Her eyes widened. She touched the pencils carefully, almost afraid they might vanish. "For me?" Daniel nodded. "Of course." She opened the box slowly, picked out a pink pencil, and began to draw. The first thing she drew was a small house with smoke coming out of the chimney. Daniel watched quietly, his chest tightening as he realized how much such a simple thing meant to her. He wanted to know more. He wanted to understand her story. But every time he asked about her family, she would go quiet. Days passed before she finally said something more. It happened one evening. The rain tapped gently against the window, and Lily was coloring in her sketchbook. She paused, staring at the page for a long time, before whispering, "My mom used to draw with me." Daniel looked at her carefully. "Your mom?" She nodded, her eyes still on the paper. She died a few months ago." Daniel felt his heart ache. He wanted to reach out, but he stayed still, letting her speak at her own pace. "She got sick," Lily continued, her voice trembling. She was in the hospital too, but she never came back." Daniel swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Lily." She wiped at her eyes quickly, as if she didn't want him to see her cry. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, after she was gone, "My dad didn't want me anymore. He said he couldn't." The words broke Daniel in a way he didn't expect. He had known there must be something painful behind her silence, but hearing it made it real. A little girl abandoned by her own father after losing her mother. "Where did you go?" Daniel asked softly. "Sometimes I stayed with my aunt," Lily said, hugging the sketchbook to her chest. "But she has too many kids already. Sometimes I stayed with neighbors. Sometimes I just stayed outside."
How?
Daniel felt like his chest was being crushed. He had grown up with parents who were too busy for him, who cared more about work than about being there. But at least they had kept him in a house. At least they hadn't left him alone. He couldn't imagine what Lily must have felt, waiting at a bus stop for a father who never came back. He reached out slowly, placing his hand gently over hers. "You didn't deserve that, Lily. None of it." She looked at him then, her eyes red but full of something else too, something like hope. That night, when Daniel finally went home, he couldn't sleep. He stood by the tall glass window of his penthouse, looking out at the city lights, and for the first time they looked meaningless. His success, his empire, his lonely life, it all felt hollow compared to the small hand that had clutched his in the hospital. He remembered how light she felt when he carried her, how fragile her voice was when she spoke about her mother. He remembered how she had looked at him with trust. Even though she had every reason not to trust anyone, the next few days, Daniel spent more and more time with her. He would bring little things, books, snacks, even a stuffed animal that made her laugh quietly when he handed it to her awkwardly. "You don't like toys, do you?" she teased softly. Daniel smiled faintly. "Not really." "Might," she hugged the toy close. "I like it." Her small moments of happiness warmed something inside him. But at the same time, he noticed how his own life was changing. His assistants complained about his distraction. His board members worried when he canceled meetings. His secretary even asked, "Sir, is everything all right? You've never missed so many calls before?" Daniel brushed them off, but he knew. They were right. For the first time in his life, work wasn't his first thought when he woke up. Lily was. One evening, as they sat together in the hospital garden, Lily asked a question that surprised him. "Why do you come here every day?" Daniel looked at her, caught off guard. "Because I want to make sure you're okay." "But you don't even know me," she said, tilting her head. Daniel paused, searching for words. Finally, he said quietly, "Sometimes you don't need to know someone for a long time to care about them." Lily thought about that, then gave a small smile. "You're different." The words lingered in Daniel's mind long after she went back to her room. Different. Maybe she was right. He was changing, and he knew it. The walls he had built around himself for years were cracking, piece by piece, every time she smiled at him or trusted him with another piece of her story. One night, as he drove home, he remembered his own childhood. His parents had been wealthy, too busy with their business to spend time with him. He'd eaten dinners alone, done his homework alone, celebrated birthdays with only nannies and staff around. He'd promised himself long ago that he would never need anyone, that he would only depend on himself. But now, sitting in the back of his car, he realized how much he wished someone had been there for him the way Lily needed someone now. The thought scared him, because it meant he wanted something he had told himself he didn't need for years: family, connection, love. But he also felt fear. Could he give that to Lily? Could a man like him, who had failed at marriage, who knew nothing about children, ever be what she needed? Pushed the thoughts away, but they returned every time he saw her. When she laughed at a silly drawing, when she fell asleep holding the stuffed animal, when she whispered good night to him as he left. He was a man used to solving problems with money, with contracts, with power. But this was different. This was about something deeper, something his wealth couldn't buy. And even though he didn't know what would happen next, one thing was clear. Lily was no longer just a stranger he had saved at a bus stop. She was becoming part of his life, part of his heart in a way he couldn't ignore. The weeks passed, and Lily slowly became stronger. She could walk around the hospital garden without feeling too tired, and her cheeks looked brighter now. Daniel stayed close to her, and the nurses noticed how unusual it was. Many children had visitors, but this child had a man who never seemed to leave her side. Some whispered about it. Some even smiled softly at the sight, because they could see how Lily's eyes lit up whenever he entered the room. But not everything was simple. The social worker kept returning, reminding Daniel that soon decisions had to be made about Lily's future. One afternoon, she came into the hospital room with a serious expression. "Mr. Ross," she said, "we appreciate everything you've done for this child, but we need to begin the process of placing her into foster care. Since she has no immediate family willing to care for her, the state must step in." Daniel's heart sank. He had known this moment would come, but hearing it aloud made it feel real, sharp, painful. He glanced at Lily, who sat quietly on the bed, her small fingers tightening around her sketchbook as if she understood every word. "Foster care?" Daniel repeated, his voice rougher than he intended. The social worker nodded. "Yes, there are families who can take her in. She needs a stable environment, school, routine. She can't stay in the hospital forever." Daniel wanted to argue, but he bit his tongue. Instead, he said firmly, "She's not ready to be moved yet. She still needs time." The woman gave him a polite but firm look. "Mr. Ross, I know you care about her." But unless you're family, your role here is limited. You can't keep her with you." The words cut him. For years, nothing had shaken him. Business losses, failed deals, even his divorce. But the idea of Lily being taken away felt unbearable. That evening, when the social worker left, Daniel sat beside Lily and tried to smile. "Don't worry, Lily. Everything will be all right." She looked up at him with wide, scared eyes. "They're going to take me away, aren't they?" Daniel felt his chest tighten. "No one's taking you away from me," he said quickly, though he wasn't sure how true that was. She hesitated, then whispered, "Promise." He nodded, though inside he was drowning in doubt. Promise. The promise stayed with him all night. He couldn't sleep. Instead, he called his lawyers, asking questions he had never thought he would ask in his life. Could a single man, a busy CEO, adopt a child like Lily? Could he even try? The lawyers were cautious. It's possible, but very difficult. The court will question everything: your lifestyle, your long work hours, your past divorce. Ask if you can give her what she needs. It won't be easy. Daniel listened, but he didn't back down. For once, he wasn't thinking about what was easy or difficult. He was thinking about Lily. It's about the way she had whispered promise with tears in her eyes. The next few days were full of meetings he didn't care about, phone calls he ignored, and late nights at the hospital with Lily. He brought her books to read and sometimes sat beside her bed while she colored. They talked about little things, her favorite colors, the stories her mother used to tell, the dreams she had about having a real home again. One evening, she said softly, "I like it when you're here. It feels safe." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. No one had ever said that to him. He had built skyscrapers, companies, and fortunes, but nothing had ever made him feel the way her words did. When the social worker returned again, Daniel spoke before she could say anything. "I want custody of her. I'll fight for it." The woman raised her eyebrows. "Mr. Ross, this isn't a business deal. This is about a child's life. Are you sure you understand what you're asking?" "I understand," Daniel said firmly. "I know what it means, and I'm not walking away." From that moment, everything became a battle. Paperwork, interviews, background checks. The system didn't trust him easily. Judges and officials questioned his ability. How will a man who works 80 hours a week raise a child? How can someone who has never been a parent suddenly become one? Every question was like a strike against him. His own board members whispered about his distraction. Some even suggested he was making a mistake. "This could damage your reputation," one advisor warned. Daniel didn't care. For the first time, reputation meant nothing to him. The only thing that mattered was keeping Lily safe. Meanwhile, his bond with her grew stronger. She began calling him uncle one evening without even realizing it. She was showing him her drawing, a tall man in a suit holding the hand of a little girl. "This is us," she said proudly. "Uncle Daniel and me." The name stuck. She began using it every day. Though Daniel had never thought of himself as anyone's uncle, the word warmed him in a way he couldn't explain. But even as their connection grew, the fear grew too. The social worker reminded him gently, "The courts may still decide against you. Foster care is the most likely option." Daniel tried to stay calm in front of Lily, but at night, when he was alone, the thought of losing her kept him awake. He had never been afraid of losing anything in his life, because everything could be rebuilt. Money could be earned again. Companies could be saved. But Lily could not be replaced. The court date finally came. Daniel sat in the courtroom, his lawyers beside him, while Lily waited outside with a nurse. The judge looked at him with a stern expression. "Mr. Ross," the judge said, "you are a successful man. But being a parent is not about success. It is about time, patience, love. You have no experience in this. Why should this court believe you can care for a child?" Daniel stood up, his voice steady, but filled with emotion he had not shown in years. "Because I care for her. Because I found her when no one else was there. Because she has already lost everything, and I cannot let her lose more. She doesn't need perfection. She needs someone who won't leave, and I won't leave her." Words echoed in the courtroom, but he could see doubt in the judge's eyes. They reviewed his past, his divorce, his long work hours. They spoke about his lack of parenting skills. It felt like every piece of his life was being used to prove he was unfit. When the decision came, it broke him. The court ruled that Lily would be placed into foster care for now. Daniel's chest felt like it was being crushed as he watched the nurse take her hand and lead her away. She looked back at him with tears streaming down her face. "Uncle Daniel, don't let them take me," she cried. Those words tore through him like nothing else ever had. For the first time in his life, Daniel Ross, the man who never lost, felt completely powerless. He wanted to run after her, to fight harder, but the law had tied his hands. When the doors closed behind her, Daniel sat down heavily, his face pale, his hands shaking. The empire he had built meant nothing at that moment. He had lost the only thing that mattered. That night, his penthouse felt colder and emptier than ever. He walked from room to room, seeing nothing but shadows. Silence pressed down on him, and he could still hear her voice echoing in his mind. "Don't let them take me." For the first time in years, Daniel cried. The next days were some of the hardest of Daniel's life. The hospital felt empty, without Lily's laughter, without her small footsteps echoing down the corridors. Her absence made his world feel colder, lonelier than ever before. He went through his usual routines at work, signed papers, attended meetings, but none of it mattered. Every chair he sat in, every phone call he made, every deal he considered, his mind kept drifting back to Lily. He called the foster care agency multiple times, asking about her, checking if she was okay. The answers were always polite but distant. "She's fine for now. She's with a caring family." But Daniel could tell from the tone that it wasn't enough. Caring wasn't enough. He had seen her face, the way she trusted him, the way she had whispered, "Don't let them take me." Those words haunted him like a shadow he couldn't escape. One evening, he decided he couldn't wait any longer. He asked his lawyers if there was any way he could still fight for custody, even after the initial court ruling. "There's a possibility," one lawyer said cautiously, "but it will take time, and the court will be very strict. The child's current placement must be considered stable. But if the current foster family can't continue, or if you can show you can provide a better environment, it could work." Daniel nodded, determination setting in. He didn't care about the difficulty. All he could see was Lily, alone, afraid, and waiting for someone who would not leave her again. The days turned into weeks. Daniel visited the foster agency offices, filled out forms, attended interviews, and answered endless questions about his lifestyle, his apartment, his work hours. He showed pictures of the hospital room where he had sat by Lily's bed, pictures of her drawing, pictures of the small toy he had given her. He spoke honestly about why he wanted her, not because it was convenient, not because he wanted to be seen as a hero, but because she had touched something inside him he didn't know existed until he met her. The social worker handling his case eventually called him. "Mr. Ross, I have news. The foster family caring for Lily has reported that they cannot continue. They have multiple children and are moving to another state. We need a placement for her soon. Are you still interested?" Daniel's hand shook slightly as he answered, "Yes, I want her to come to me. Please." "Very well," she said. "We will start the process immediately, but you must be prepared for the legal steps. You will have to prove to the court that this is the best place for her." Daniel agreed without hesitation. He prepared his penthouse, bought everything a child might need, set up a room full of warm blankets, toys, books, and drawings. He cleaned it until it felt like a home, a real home, not just a high-rise apartment. But more importantly, he prepared himself. He knew the court would question his ability, his experience, his life. He knew they would challenge him at every turn. But he didn't care. He only cared about Lily. Finally, the day came when he was allowed to meet her again. The foster family brought her to a small room at the agency. When she saw him, her eyes widened, and for a moment, she froze. "Lily," Daniel whispered softly, kneeling down so he was at her level. "It's me, Uncle Daniel." Her small face lit up, and she ran into his arms. She buried her face in his chest and whispered, "I missed you so much." Daniel held her tightly, feeling tears run down his face. "I missed you too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. The legal process that followed was stressful and tense. The court asked countless questions, reviewed his past, examined his apartment, questioned his work schedule, and even spoke to his assistants. Daniel answered honestly, calmly, and with the conviction of a man who had finally found his purpose. He explained how he had met Lily, how he had cared for her, how he understood her needs, and how he would dedicate himself to her fully. Lily sat quietly beside him during the hearings, holding his hand. She didn't speak much, but her presence gave him courage. Every time he glanced at her small face, her big brown eyes looking up at him with trust, he felt strength he had never known in boardrooms or business deals. The judge asked one final question during the hearing. "Mr. Ross, are you aware of the responsibilities you are taking on? Are you ready to give this child not only food and shelter, but love, guidance, and attention every day of her life?" Daniel's voice was steady, but full of emotion. "Yes, Your Honor, I am ready. I may not be perfect, but I will never leave her alone. She has already lost too much. I will do everything I can to give her the home and family she deserves." The judge studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. Based on your dedication and preparations, and considering the child's best interest, the court grants custody to Mr. Daniel Ross." Relief washed over Daniel like nothing else he had ever experienced. He felt as if a weight he didn't even realize he had been carrying had lifted from his shoulders. He could hardly believe it. He had won not a business deal, not a contract, but something far more important. He had won the chance to protect and love Lily. That evening, he brought her home. She ran around the apartment, exploring every corner, laughing. Her energy and joy filling the space in a way it had never been filled before. Daniel watched her quietly, smiling despite the tears in his eyes. He realized that this little girl, abandoned and fragile, had brought warmth and life to a part of him he thought had died long ago. They ate dinner together that night. Lily sat in a chair much too big for her, trying to cut her food carefully. Daniel watched her, realizing how much responsibility and love went into simple things feeding her. Making her laugh, helping her feel safe. "Do you like it here?" he asked softly. Lily nodded vigorously. "It's perfect. I love it." Daniel smiled, his heart full. "I'm glad. We'll make it even better, okay? Together." Over the next days, Daniel and Lily settled into a new routine. Mornings were filled with breakfast together, reading and drawing. Afternoons were for walks in the park or visits to the library. Evenings were spent cooking simple meals and sharing stories. Daniel found himself laughing more than he had in years. Listening to Lily's little jokes, her small but endless questions about life, about the world, about him. He also learned patience in ways he had never imagined. He'd learned how to comfort her when she was scared, how to encourage her when she was unsure, how to celebrate small victories like finishing a drawing or learning a new word. And he realized something profound. Success in life wasn't about money or power. It was about these moments, these bonds, these connections that filled the heart and soul. One night, after tucking her into bed and kissing her forehead, Daniel sat in the living room quietly, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. From the rainy bus stop to the hospital, from uncertainty and fear to this small apartment filled with life and warmth, everything had led to this. He had found Lily, and in finding her, he had found himself. For the first time in years, Daniel felt whole. He realized that even a life that seemed complete with wealth and power could feel empty without love, without connection, without someone to care for and be cared by in return. And he knew that he would never let Lily face the world alone again. As he watched her sleep peacefully, he whispered softly, "You're home now, Lily. You'll never be alone again." And for the first time in a long time, he believed it.